The morning sun filtered through the dining room windows, casting long shadows across the marble countertop, where Corinne Davidson stood scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of someone whose attention was a limited commodity. The kitchen smelled like expensive coffee and the faint chemical sweetness of the cleaning solution Maria had used that morning. Marcus sat at the island, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate in patterns that had nothing to do with appetite. He was 12 now, old enough to know when he was being ignored, too young to understand why it still hurt. His mother had been like this all summer, here but not here. Present but performing presence, like an actor running through lines she'd memorized but stopped believing in. "Your friend invited you to his pool party," Corinne said, still looking at her phone. Her nails, fresh manicure, some shade of coral that probably had a pretentious name, clicked against the glass of her water tumbler. "The Hendersons, Saturday 2 to 5. Marcus looked up. "Really, that's—" "You're going?" She finally turned to him, but her eyes didn't quite land on his face. They glanced across his general direction like light reflecting off a mirror. "I have the Westwood Charity Committee meeting at 3 and I'm not paying for a sitter. You'll be occupied. Everyone wins." Marcus had learned the calculus of his mother's decisions. Occupied was her favorite word. It meant he was solved for, like a math problem that no longer required her attention. He wanted to say he'd already been invited, that he was going anyway, that maybe she could, for once, just ask what he wanted instead of informing him of the decisions she'd already made. But he'd learned that wanting things from Corinne Davidson was like asking a statue for affection. "Okay," he said instead. "The Hendersons, Saturday." "Don't be difficult." She picked up her coffee cup. "And please, Marcus, try not to make a spectacle of yourself. The Hendersons are important people. I need you to understand that." He understood. He'd always understood. Being important meant being contained. Being contained meant being quiet, grateful, and above all else, unremarked upon. That Saturday arrived like every other Saturday in the summer heat. Too bright, too hot, the kind of day that pressed down on you like a physical weight. Marcus's dad, David, drove him to the Hendersons' house in their neighborhood that existed in that peculiar space occupied by people whose wealth was so established they didn't feel the need to broadcast it. The houses were large but not ostentatiously so. The lawns were perfectly maintained. Every mailbox had the same understated elegance. "You having fun this summer?" David asked, navigating the tree-lined streets with the casual competence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Unlike Corinne, Marcus's father seemed to actually occupy the space of his own life. "It's okay," Marcus said, which was the truth compressed into 2 words. Summer was a slow accumulation of nothing: video games, books. The ache of knowing his parents had married each other instead of just meeting at a party and going their separate ways. "Your mother mentioned you're working on that science project, the one about water filtration." Marcus was startled. His mother never mentioned his projects. She asked about them, or rather, she asked to ensure they existed and wouldn't reflect poorly on her, but she didn't retain the information. Hearing his father mention it felt like being seen. "Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. I learned that most pool filters are really inefficient, like theoretically if you design the system a different way." "That's really interesting, Marcus." His father meant it. You could hear the difference when someone actually meant it. "Your mind works like this. You see how things could be better and you figure out how to make that happen. That's rare." Marcus wanted to say something, wanted to hold onto this moment where his father was really looking at him instead of looking past him toward the next obligation on his calendar. But they were already pulling up to the Hendersons' house, a pristine colonial with a 3-car garage and a backyard that descended toward the most beautiful in-ground pool Marcus had ever seen. The party was the kind that was simultaneously too formal and too chaotic. There were 17 kids gathered around the pool, but everyone was performing at it rather than actually being at it. The boys flexing in a way that seemed rehearsed, the girls laughing with an eye toward who was watching. Marcus knew most of them from school, but they had that quality that 7th graders possessed. They were all desperately trying to become their coolest possible selves and failing in exactly the same way. He changed into his swim trunks and was heading toward the pool when he heard the voice. "Absolutely not." Corinne was standing at the back door of the Hendersons' house, still in her work clothes, a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants that somehow made her look like she was made of material more rigid than human flesh. She had her phone in one hand and the expression of someone who just discovered an intolerable situation. Mom, Marcus felt the attention of the entire party shift toward him. He felt his face flush. What are you doing here? I left my wallet at the Hendersons' house last week at Bridge Club, Corinne said, moving toward him with purpose. And I'm glad I did, because I can see exactly what's about to happen here, and I'm putting a stop to it immediately. Marcus looked around. Nothing was happening. Kids were sitting around the pool, some in the water, everyone in that suspended state of trying to be cool while being watched. The committee meeting ended early, Corinne continued, approaching like she was preparing to physically remove him. And I'm very glad it did. Marcus, you're not getting in that water. Why not? He asked it quietly, aware that every eye was now on him. He could feel Tommy Henderson smirking. Tommy Henderson had been smirking at him since 3rd grade. Because you're soaking wet within 15 minutes and then we're sitting in a humid car for 20 minutes, and I don't need my upholstery ruined. We just had it detailed. She was already pulling a towel off a nearby lounge chair. Come on, we're leaving. Mom, he tried to keep his voice level, mature, reasonable, the qualities that might actually reach her. I was invited. I want to stay. And I'm uninviting you. You're getting splashing water everywhere and making a mess. Chlorine is very hard on my leather interior, Marcus. You know this. The word splashing landed between them like something heavy. Several of the other kids heard it and immediately began trying to suppress their smiles. This was better than anything they'd planned for the afternoon, a genuine moment of public humiliation. 13-year-olds could smell that vulnerability like sharks detecting blood in water. I'll dry off, Marcus said. I'll sit in the towel the whole way home, please. Corinne's expression hardened into something that resembled mercy, but wasn't. It was the face she made when she'd made a decision and expected gratitude for it. No splashing, she said like she was making a decree. And if you get water in my car, we're done with summer activities, all of them, do you understand? The entire backyard had gone quiet. Even the kids in the pool had stopped moving. They were all watching this kid stand there, choosing between his mother and 15 minutes of normal summer experience. Marcus nodded. He felt something shift inside him. Some small place where he'd been hopping his mother was still a person he could reach. That small place calcified into something harder. No splashing, he repeated, and he walked toward the pool. He sat at the edge of it, dipping his legs in, water immediately soaking into the towel he'd placed carefully around his hips and legs. He didn't move. He didn't splash. He sat there for an hour like an exhibit in a museum, the boy who was not allowed to actually participate in his own life. When they got in the car to leave, Corinne didn't say anything. She just turned up the AC and focused on the road. Marcus stared out the window at the summer spreading out beyond the glass, all that heat and light and possibility happening to everyone except him. You're being ungrateful, Corinne said as they pulled into their driveway. I drove here, I gave up time, and you still gave me that look. I didn't give you a look, Marcus said. You absolutely did. That look that says I'm the villain. That look that says you think you're suffering. You're not suffering, Marcus. You're not even close. Do you know how many children would be grateful for what you have? Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed out of the car. They had this conversation once a week, sometimes twice. It never ended anywhere good. At least try to be thankful, Corinne called after him as he walked toward the house. Try to be someone I can actually be proud of. He went to his room and closed the door. Outside his window, he could see the shape of their pool, modest, not impressive, the kind of pool that belonged to people who had money but were trying to seem like they didn't. He thought about Tommy Henderson's face. He thought about the other kids trying not to smile. He thought about no splashing, as if those 2 words had somehow become the law of his entire existence. 3 days passed, 3 days of summer stretching out in front of him like an infinite hallway with nowhere to go. His father was at work. His mother was at her committee meetings, her book clubs, her charity functions, an endless rotation of obligations to people who probably appreciated her about as much as she appreciated him. Maria came twice a week to clean, to organize, to make the house perfect for people to live in without actually living in it. Marcus spent most of his time in the backyard. He would sit by the pool and read books about engineering and physics, watching the way the light bent through the water, thinking about filtration systems and pressure dynamics, and how, theoretically, an ordinary pool could be transformed into something extraordinary if you had the right design. He was in this meditative state, notebook spread on his lap, sketching out a redesign of the pool's circulation system, when the idea came to him. It wasn't a small idea. It wasn't a polite idea. It was the kind of idea that arrives fully formed, like you've actually been planning it all along and your brain just finally caught up with your hands. He could turn the pool into a water park. Not theoretically, actually, practically right here. Marcus closed his notebook and stared at the pool. He was calculating angles and pressures and what could be accomplished with a 12-year-old's pocket money and whatever he could find or borrow from his father's garage. An inflatable water slide could be purchased. Multiple water cannons could be constructed using PVC pipe and basic mechanics. He could rig up a system using the existing pool circulation to create a wave, not a massive one, but enough to splash. Enough to create chaos in the perfectly managed aquatic space his mother had reduced to a zone of enforced tranquility. The genius of it was that it would all be technically within his mother's rules. She'd said no splashing. She'd never said anything about water slides. She'd never said anything about water cannons or artificial waves or transforming the family pool into an attraction that required an actual engineering plan. He could do this. He was going to do this. Tuesday morning, he asked his father for money. $50? David looked up from his laptop. He was working from home that day, which happened maybe once a month and always felt like discovering an unexpected holiday. What for? Project, Marcus said carefully. He'd learned to be vague with his father in a way that was different from being vague with his mother. His father's vagueness was genuine acceptance rather than dismissal. For the pool. David raised an eyebrow. He was learning to see his son in the gaps between his mother's management of him. What kind of project? Something with water flow dynamics. I want to test some theories. His father smiled, genuinely smiled, in the way that made Marcus feel less like a problem to be solved and more like a person being recognized. That sounds cool. Do you need help? No, Marcus meant it. This had to be his. This had to be the thing he built completely alone, without supervision or approval or anyone telling him it was too much. Just the money. David pulled out his wallet and handed over 3 20s. Let me see what you build. That afternoon, Marcus went to Target with a purpose he hadn't felt all summer. He purchased a large inflatable water slide, the kind with bright colors and a curve that would send a person flying into the deep end with actual velocity. He bought 2 large water guns. He bought a rope and some carabiners. He was thinking ahead, visualizing the systems, understanding how pressure and angles and velocity worked together. Wednesday, he went to his father's garage and found PVC pipe, connectors, and a collection of tools that made him feel like a real engineer instead of a kid playing with things in a backyard. He worked in the heat of the afternoon, designing a water cannon that could be mounted to the pool deck and fed directly from the pool circulation system. It was beautiful in its simplicity, physics doing exactly what it was supposed to do. His father came out around 5 o'clock, carrying 2 bottles of water and a smile. Okay, I see what you're doing now, David said, examining the contraption. That's actually really elegant. You designed this yourself. Yeah, Marcus showed him the sketches, the calculations. His father listened with the kind of attention that felt rare and precious, the kind that suggested his son's ideas had actual value. This is impressive, Marcus. This is really impressive. Have you tested the pressure flow? They spent the next 2 hours refining the design. His father didn't tell him what to do. He asked questions that helped Marcus figure out what needed to be adjusted. By the time the sun started setting, they had a functional water cannon that could redirect the pool's circulation into a powerful spray. Your mother's going to lose her mind, David said, not unkindly. He understood something about Corinne that Marcus was only beginning to grasp, that her need for control wasn't really about control at all. It was about the exhaustion of believing that without control, everything would collapse. I know, Marcus said. Is that the point? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Was it? He thought about the look on his mother's face at the Hendersons' party. He thought about no splashing, like it was the most important rule in the history of rules. He thought about how control looked from the outside and how it felt from the inside. The point is I'm building something, Marcus said finally. I'm actually creating something instead of just not being here. His father nodded. He understood. Just be prepared for consequences. I always am, Marcus said. Thursday morning, Marcus began the transformation. He assembled the inflatable slide, positioning it at the pool's edge so that it curved over the water like a promise. He anchored the water cannon to the deck using the mounting system he'd designed. He placed the water guns at strategic positions around the pool. He strung the rope from the house to the far end of the pool, creating a zip line that someone could use to propel themselves across the water. By noon, the backyard looked like a legitimate water park. A small one, yes. A backyard one, absolutely. But something had shifted from boring to extraordinary. The ordinary had become intentional. The space had become alive. He tested everything carefully. The water cannon worked perfectly, drawing water from the circulation system and propelling it in a forceful spray. The slide was secure and functional. The rope stayed taut under pressure. He'd created something that actually worked, something that moved beyond theory into reality. At 3:30 that afternoon, Marcus heard the car pull into the driveway. He was standing by the pool, arms crossed, waiting. His mother got out of her car first, still in her work clothes. Today's outfit was a structured blazer and designer sunglasses. She took exactly 2 steps toward the house before she saw the backyard. Her body went completely still. The water slide was bright blue and orange, impossible to miss. The water cannon gleamed in the sunlight. The rope was visible against the green of the yard. It was chaos made visible, carefully engineered chaos, but chaos nonetheless. "What," Karen said slowly, walking around the pool deck, "is all of this?" "It's a water park," Marcus said. He kept his voice level. He'd been rehearsing this moment since Tuesday. "I built it using hydraulic principles and basic mechanical engineering. The water cannon draws from the pool circulation system. The slide is anchored to the deck. It's all safe. All the systems are secure." Karen took off her sunglasses. "You did this without asking me." "Yes. You took the pool that we had specifically designed to be a relaxing, controlled space." "I know what I did," Marcus said. "And you turned it into some kind of carnival attraction." "I built something," Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice now, all the summer's quiet ache turning into something sharper. "I actually made something instead of just sitting and being yelled at for existing. I engineered a system. I did the math. I made it work." "This is not about what you made," Karen said, her voice taking on that crystalline quality it got when she was preparing to be very angry. "This is about the fact that you did it without permission. This is about respect." "Respect?" Marcus laughed, actually laughed, and the sound surprised both of them. "You don't respect me, Mom. You control me. You told me no splashing like I was a dog and you were teaching it a trick. You showed up to a party I was invited to and embarrassed me in front of all my friends. You've decided that my preferences don't matter, that my ideas don't matter, that I'm just supposed to be grateful for whatever small space you allow me to occupy. So no, I didn't ask permission. I did something anyway." Karen's face had gone very pale. She was the kind of person who didn't receive pushback well, the kind of person who had been managing situations and outcomes for so long that the idea that she couldn't manage her own son was apparently shocking to her system. "The backyard is going back to normal immediately," she said. "All of this comes down today. We're taking it apart right now." "No," Marcus said simply. "What did you just say to me?" "No," it was amazing how liberating one small word could be. "No, I'm not taking it apart. I built this. I'm keeping it." "You live in my house," Karen said, and there was something desperate in her voice now, something that suggested she was running out of leverage and didn't know what to do about it. "You follow my rules. You do what I say or you lose privileges. Pool time, obviously, your phone, your summer. Do you understand?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I understand. I'm doing it anyway." That was when his father came out of the house. David took in the scene with the speed of someone who'd learned to read situations quickly. His angry wife, his defiant son, the elaborate water park setup, the palpable tension that had replaced the summer heat. "What's happening here?" he asked, though his eyes had already found the answer in the space between Karen and Marcus. That dangerous gap where communication became negotiation became ultimatum. "Your son," Karen said, "has decided to ignore every single rule in this house." "Our son," David corrected gently, "has apparently built a water park without asking, which I'll note is actually pretty impressive from an engineering standpoint." "I don't care about the engineering," Karen said. "I care about the disrespect. I care about the fact that he thinks he can just—" "Karen," David's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who'd finally decided to occupy his own ground. "Can I talk to you inside for a minute?" She stared at him. For a moment, it seemed like she might refuse, like she might make this a three-person conflict instead of a two-person one. But something in David's expression, some suggestion of finality, made her turn toward the house. "Stay right here," she snapped at Marcus. "We're not done with this." Marcus watched his parents disappear inside. Through the kitchen window, he could see them talking. He couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language, his father standing solid and calm, his mother gesturing with the sharp movements of someone who was running out of arguments. At one point, David reached out and touched her arm, and she didn't pull away. They talked for 20 minutes while Marcus stood in the backyard, acutely aware of the water park he'd built, the physical manifestation of his decision to stop complying, to stop being small and grateful and contained. When his parents came back outside, Karen looked like someone who'd been through something. Her eyes were red. Her posture had lost some of its rigidity. "You're not using the pool for a week," she said to Marcus, her voice flat. "You're grounded from the slide and the water cannons, and you're going to sit with me and your father, and we're going to have a real conversation about boundaries and communication. Because apparently I've been doing something very wrong." She walked past him back into the house and closed the door with more care than slam. David remained in the backyard. He looked at the water park, then at his son. "That took courage," he said finally. "Stupid courage maybe, but courage nonetheless. Your mother. She's going to need some time, but I think this is maybe the beginning of something that needed to happen." "Did she listen?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," his father admitted. "But she tried, and that's more than I was going to get before." That night, Marcus sat in his room and listened to his parents talk through the walls. Low voices, not angry, just talking, actually communicating in a way that suggested they were both finally showing up to their own marriage. And in the backyard, the water park waited. Friday brought a heat wave that felt like the sky pressing down directly on the earth. The backyard was shimmering in that specific summer way that makes everything seem slightly dreamlike and dangerous, a quality Marcus had come to appreciate more in the last 24 hours. His mother had kept her word, no pool time for him, no water slide, no water cannons, no anything aquatic, but the equipment remained gleaming and available and utterly forbidden. It was, Marcus understood, a calculated punishment. Let him build the thing, then prevent him from enjoying it. Control through deprivation. He was reading in his room when he heard the knock on his door. Not his mother's knock, she announced herself with sound and authority. This was different, softer. "Come in," he said. Karen stood in the doorway for a long moment without speaking. She'd changed since yesterday. There was something softer about her appearance, or maybe just more honest. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was in a simple ponytail. She looked like a person instead of a position. "Can we talk?" she asked. Marcus sat up. He gestured to the chair by his desk. His mother sat down slowly, like she was testing whether the furniture would hold her. "I spoke to a therapist this morning," Karen began. She paused, clearly waiting to see if he'd respond. He didn't. "Not a therapist. I called one. I have an appointment on Monday. Your father suggested it. I think he's right." Marcus wasn't sure what to say to this. His mother had just implied that she might have actual problems that required professional help, which was the kind of thing adults weren't supposed to admit to their children. "I've been thinking," Karen continued, "about why I said no splashing, about why I left the party early, about why I—" She stopped, collected herself. "About why I'm always so afraid that if I'm not controlling everything, it will all fall apart." "Is it," Marcus asked quietly, "falling apart because you let go?" Karen was quiet for a long time. She looked out Marcus's window toward the pool, toward the water park that had become the physical representation of her son's rebellion. "I had a panic attack," she said. "After I went inside yesterday, your father had to talk me down from it. I realized I couldn't actually force you to do anything anymore, that the moment you said no, I'd reached the end of my leverage, and that terrified me." Marcus didn't move. He was watching his mother become something other than his mother, something more like a person. It was unsettling and oddly touching. "When I was your age," Karen said, "my mother controlled everything too, and when I got to college, I went completely wild. I did things I regret. I hurt people. I told myself that would never happen to me as a parent, that I would never let things get out of control. But I think I swung too far the other way." "So what does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means I'm going to try to do better." Karen looked at her hands. It means that the water park stays. It means you can use it starting tomorrow. It means I'm going to work with your father on being less dictatorial about everything. But it also means you can't just build something in our backyard without asking me. Communication has to go both ways. Okay, Marcus said. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I should have asked. I wanted to show you what I could do. I wanted you to see that I could actually create something. Corinne's eyes got wet. She looked away quickly like she was embarrassed by the tears. I see, she said. I'm seeing, I'm trying to see. She left his room after that, and Marcus heard her go downstairs. Through his window, he watched her walk to the pool deck and stand there, looking at the water park with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not disapproval, maybe something closer to respect. That afternoon, something shifted in the house's emotional weather. His father was home early. His mother was in a good mood, genuinely not performed. They had dinner together, the three of them, and nobody was checking their phone. His parents were actually talking to him, asking about his day, listening to his answers like they mattered. So how does the water cannon actually work? His father asked, and Marcus explained the mechanics, the pressure dynamics, the way the circulation system could be redirected. His mother listened without correcting him, without suggesting it was dangerous or stupid or unnecessary. She just listened. Saturday morning, Marcus was allowed back in the pool. He tested the slide first. He positioned himself at the top, feeling that delicious moment of anticipation before he pushed off, that split-second awareness of height and speed and potential consequences. Then he was moving, air rushing past him, and he hit the water with an enormous splash that sent waves across the entire pool. He emerged laughing. His mother was watching from her lounge chair. She didn't say anything about splashing. She just smiled. He tested the water cannon next, aiming it at the various floats scattered in the pool. The pressure was perfect, a powerful spray that could knock things around without being actually dangerous. His father joined him, and they spray each other with the kind of unself-conscious joy that Marcus had almost forgotten was possible in his family. By afternoon, Marcus had convinced his parents to invite the Hendersons over. They had the party, Corinne said uncertainly. Are you sure they want to come here? I want to show Tommy something, Marcus said. And it was true, though not in the way she probably thought. The Hendersons arrived at 4 o'clock. Tommy, his parents, his younger sister. Tommy was already smirking before he took in the backyard, but the smirk faltered when he saw the water park. You made this? Tommy asked, and there was something in his voice that Marcus had never heard before. Not mockery, respect. Yeah, Marcus said. I engineered the whole thing. The water cannons fed from the pool circulation system. The slides reinforced anchoring. The rope has a mechanical advantage calculation built in. It's actually pretty sophisticated. That's sick, Tommy said, and he meant it. Can I try it? The afternoon became something Marcus hadn't anticipated. All the kids from the neighborhood came, drawn by the word spreading, the kid who'd built a water park. They came in clusters, and Marcus found himself explaining the engineering to each group, showing them how the systems worked. He became the expert. He became the one worth listening to. His mother watched from inside the house, her face unreadable through the glass. By evening, the water park had transformed into something beyond Marcus's original vision. It was a place where kids actually wanted to be, where the point wasn't to sit quietly and not splash, but to engage fully and authentically with the space, where chaos had become joy instead of violation. Tommy approached Marcus near the water cannon. Your mom's pretty cool for letting you do all this, he said. The water park operated like a successful small business for the next week and a half. Kids came almost every day. There was a rhythm to it. Early afternoon swimmers, dinnertime visitors, evening parties. Marcus had become the proprietor of his own backyard attraction, and there was something satisfying about that transformation. The boy who'd been forbidden to splash had become the boy everyone wanted to play with. His mother watched this evolution with an expression Marcus was still learning to interpret. Approval, maybe. Or perhaps the careful neutrality of someone performing acceptance while still struggling with the loss of control. It was a Tuesday afternoon when things began to shift. Marcus was adjusting the water cannon's pressure valve. He discovered that small modifications could make significant differences in the spray pattern. When he heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway with more aggression than necessary. Not his mother's car. Unfamiliar. The kind of arrival that suggested purpose. A woman got out. She was older, probably in her 60s, with Corinne's sharp features and Corinne's rigid posture. This was Corinne's mother, Margaret, who visited twice a year, always announced weeks in advance, never unannounced like this. Marcus watched his grandmother walk toward the backyard, taking in the water park with an expression that migrated from confusion to something darker, something like horror. "What in God's name," Margaret said, "is this obscenity?" Corinne emerged from the house quickly, too quickly, like she'd been watching the door, waiting for this. "Mom, you're not supposed to be here until next month." "I drove up early. I wanted to surprise my grandchildren." Margaret turned to face her daughter. "I take it this is your idea of parenting now, letting the boy turn the yard into some kind of carnival." Marcus felt something crystallize in the air. The temperature of the moment dropped. "It's his project," Corinne said quietly. "He built it, he engineered it." "I don't care if he engineered the pyramids," Margaret snapped. "It's tacky and ridiculous, and it makes the entire neighborhood look like—" She stopped, seeming to run out of sufficient words. "It makes us look common." That word, common, Marcus understood what it meant in his grandmother's mouth. It meant uncontrolled, undisciplined, below a certain standard of presentation. "It stays," Corinne said, and there was something in her voice that Marcus had never heard before. Actual conviction. "It stays because my son built it and I'm proud of him." "Corinne," Margaret stepped closer, "you're letting sentiment override judgment. You're raising a son who thinks he can just do whatever he wants without asking. Do you understand what that turns into? Do you have any idea what that looks like from the outside?" "I don't care what it looks like from the outside," Corinne said. "Yes, you do." Margaret's voice was cold. "You always have. You've always cared deeply about how things appear. That's not sentiment, Margaret. That's how we maintain standards." Marcus watched his mother's face. He could see the moment when old patterns reasserted themselves, the moment when her mother's voice became louder in her head than his own, the moment when control seemed more important than connection. "Mom," Corinne began, but her voice had already changed. It was smaller, more uncertain. "The water park comes down," Margaret said. "Today, before the neighborhood association hears about it." "No," Corinne said, but it was weak. It was habit rather than conviction. "Yes," Margaret said. "You're going to march outside right now and tell that boy to dismantle it. You're going to tell him that we have standards in this family. You're going to tell him that appearances matter." Marcus watched his mother's face cycle through a conflict so visible it was like watching someone break in real time. He could see her trying to hold on to the things she'd learned, that her son's creations mattered, that his pride in his work was worth something. He could see her wanting to maintain that fragile new understanding they'd built. And he could see her mother's will crushing down on her like gravity, pulling her back towards something familiar and comfortable and destructive. "The pool is one thing," Margaret continued. "It's unfortunate, but we can work around it. But this is teaching him that the world revolves around his desires. This is teaching him to be selfish." "It's teaching him to be brave," Corinne whispered. But even as she said it, she was already crumbling. "It's teaching him to be undisciplined. Now, are you going to be the parent here, or do I need to handle it myself?" Corinne looked at Marcus. For a moment, their eyes held. He could see the battle happening inside her, between the person she was trying to become and the person her mother had designed her to be. He could see her losing. "I'm sorry," she said to Marcus. "The water park has to come down." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Not the water park. Something more fundamental than that. He felt the moment his mother had chosen control over connection, chosen her own mother over her own son, chosen the approval of the neighborhood association over his engineering achievement. "You're serious?" he asked. "I'm your mother," Corinne said, and it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "I have to maintain standards in this house." "These are your standards," Margaret interjected. "And I'm advising you as someone who knows what happens when children aren't properly controlled. This is for his own good." Marcus did something he'd never done before. He looked directly at his grandmother and said, "No." Margaret turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me." "No," Marcus repeated. "I'm not taking it down, and my mom's not going to make me." "You don't have a choice in this matter, young man." "Actually," Marcus said, "I do, because I built it, because it's mine, and because for once in my entire life I'm not going to let someone else decide what I'm allowed to be proud of." He looked at his mother. You taught me that I could build something, that my ideas mattered, that engineering was worth doing. You let me do that. And now you're going to let your mother tell you to make me destroy it. You're going to teach me that none of that matters, that control matters more than connection, that what people think matters more than what I think. Corinne's face crumpled. I can't, she started, but Margaret cut her off. You can and you will. This is non-negotiable, Corinne. Either you discipline this child or I'm going to have a very serious conversation with your father about your parenting abilities. That was the moment Marcus understood his family's architecture. His grandmother wasn't just Margaret. She was the voice in his mother's head. She was the weight that kept Corinne from ever being her own person. And in that moment, Marcus realized something else. He didn't have to be that for himself. He didn't have to internalize that voice. He didn't have to let anyone, including his mother, convince him that his achievements were shameful. Okay, he said quietly. I understand, the water park comes down. Corinne's face showed relief, the relief of someone who'd made a difficult decision. Marcus went to the garage and got his tools. He began systematically dismantling the water cannon. It took an hour. By the time he was done, his hands were shaking with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was the specific pain of watching someone you love choose to diminish themselves. He placed each piece of the system in a storage bin in the garage. He deflated the water slide. He coiled up the rope. By sunset, the backyard looked exactly the way it had before, blank, controlled, empty of everything that wasn't managed from above. His grandmother stayed for dinner. She talked about her bridge club and her book club and the importance of maintaining one's position in society. His mother nodded along, but her eyes were distant. His father was quiet in a way that suggested he'd learned not to fight battles he couldn't win. After his grandmother left the next morning, nobody talked about the water park. It was like it had never existed. Like Marcus's week of building and creating and believing in his own capacity to make something beautiful had been erased by morning light and family obligation. 3 days passed. 3 days of Marcus going back to reading books and not speaking at dinner. 3 days of his mother trying to make small talk that fell flat every time. 3 days of the water park parts sitting in the garage, waiting to be stored somewhere he didn't have to look at them. On the 4th day, Marcus's father found him in the garage. You're not going to just leave it like this, David said. It wasn't a question. What choice do I have? Marcus replied. More than you think, his father said, but it requires something your mother's still learning how to do. The day after his father's cryptic comment, Marcus came home from his friend's house to find his parents in the kitchen in what could only be described as a standoff. Not quite fighting, but the tension between them was visible and heavy. No, his mother was saying, that's not fair, that's using my son against me. I'm not using him against you, his father replied. I'm using him for him, there's a difference, and you know there is. They stopped talking when Marcus entered. His mother looked away. His father gestured for Marcus to come sit. Your mother and I have been talking, David said carefully, about what happened with your water park, about what it means that it came down, about why it came down. I don't want to talk about it, Marcus said. I know, his father said, but we do, because if we don't, then your grandmother wins, and I'm not letting that happen. His mother flinched. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means, David said, that I'm telling you that I'm proud of what you built, that your mother is too, even though she let someone else convince her otherwise, and it means we're rebuilding the water park. Right now, today, all of it. We can't, Corinne said quietly. My mother. Your mother, David interrupted, not unkindly, isn't going to live in this house. We are, and more importantly, Marcus lives here, and he deserves to know that his parents actually believe in him even when it's hard. It's not that simple, Corinne said. Actually, it is, David replied. It's really that simple. It's just terrifying to you because you're not used to choosing your son over your mother's expectations. But that's what being a parent is. That's what you have to do. Marcus watched his mother's face. She looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump or step back. If I do this, Corinne said slowly, if I let Marcus rebuild the water park, my mother will never speak to me again. She meant it when she said she'd talk to Dad about my parenting. Probably, David agreed. And you know what? That might be the best thing that could happen, because right now you're not actually parenting your son, you're administrating him, you're managing him, and he deserves better than that. Karen was silent for a long time. Marcus could see the gears turning, the old patterns wrestling with new possibilities. "I'm scared," Karen finally said. "I know," David replied. "That's okay, but you can't let that fear become his problem anymore." Karen looked at Marcus. Their eyes held, and Marcus saw the moment she made the decision. The moment she chose him over her mother, over her need for control, over everything she'd been taught to prioritize. "I'll help you rebuild it," she said to Marcus, "if you'll teach me how." The next 6 hours happened in a blur of activity and education. Marcus explained the engineering to both his parents as they worked. They assembled the water cannon together, his mother learning about pressure dynamics and flow rates. His father helped secure the slide to the deck. By the time the sun was setting, the water park had returned to life. "How does it work?" Karen asked, studying the water cannon they'd just installed. Marcus showed her. He explained the mechanics, the physics, the way the system used the existing pool circulation to create something that shouldn't theoretically be possible in a backyard setting. She listened, actually listened, in the way she'd been learning to do. "You're going to do something with this," Karen said. "This kind of mind, you're going to do something really significant." "Maybe," Marcus said, "or maybe I'll just build water parks." Karen smiled. It was a different smile than the ones he'd been seeing all summer. It was real. That night, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a text from his grandmother. "Your father tells me you're still playing with that water park. I'm very disappointed in your mother's lack of discipline." Marcus showed the text to his father. "That's on her," David said firmly. "That's not your problem to solve." His mother saw the text over his shoulder. She was quiet for a moment, then she picked up her phone and dialed. "Hi, Mom," Karen said when her mother answered. "I want to talk to you about expectations and standards, about what I'm choosing to value. And I want to tell you that I'm choosing my son's happiness over your approval. And that's going to have to be okay, or it's not going to be okay, but either way, that's the choice I'm making." From where he stood, Marcus could hear his grandmother's voice, sharp and incredulous. He couldn't hear the words, but he could hear the tone. "I understand," his mother said, "and I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is what needs to happen. Goodbye, Mom." She hung up the phone. The three of them stood in the kitchen in the aftermath of that conversation. The weight of it hung in the air. "That was," Karen started. "Hard," David offered. "Yeah," Karen said, "but also kind of liberating." She looked at Marcus. "I'm sorry it took that for me to figure it out. I'm sorry I let her convince me to make you tear it down." "You didn't," Marcus said. "You learned something, that's what matters." But it did matter. The water park didn't just exist in the backyard anymore. It existed as proof that something could change, that people could choose differently, that engineering your own life was actually possible. 2 weeks later, the backyard had become something legendary in the neighborhood. Kids came not just to use the water park, but to understand it, to learn how Marcus had designed it, how the systems worked, how engineering could turn something ordinary into something extraordinary. His mother had become, unexpectedly, a kind of assistant. She'd learned enough about the mechanics to help troubleshoot issues with the water cannon. She'd started reading engineering books, trying to understand her son's mind. It wasn't perfect. She still occasionally slipped into old patterns of control and management, but the direction had shifted. She was trying. The conversation with her mother hadn't healed. Margaret had called twice, both times demanding Marcus prove he wasn't becoming undisciplined. Both times, Karen had politely declined to manage her son according to her mother's specifications. "It's harder than I thought," Karen admitted one evening as they were making adjustments to the slide's anchoring system. "Not defending you from her, that part's clear, but living with her disapproval. It's like a weight I'm carrying that I never even knew I had until you started pulling it away." "You don't have to carry it," Marcus said. "She's not actually here." "She's in my head," Karen said. "That's the part I'm still working on. Your father's making me talk to that therapist, the one I called when you built this the first time." "Is it helping?" "Yeah," Karen said, and she seemed surprised to discover it. "Actually, yeah. She's helping me understand why I need things to be so controlled all the time, why I'm so afraid of chaos. It's not actually about you being disciplined. It's about me being terrified that if I'm not managing everything perfectly, I'm a failure." This was the kind of emotional honesty that Marcus's mother had never shared before. It felt significant, like a door opening that had been locked for years. "You're not a failure," Marcus said. "You're just learning how to be a different kind of person than your mother wanted you to be." "When did you get so wise?" Karen asked, and she said it with genuine affection instead of the performative pride she'd used before. "When I built a water park and discovered my mom might actually be a real person." Karen laughed, genuinely laughed, and for a moment the entire summer crystallized into something that made sense. The conflict, the rebellion, the dismantling, and now this reconstruction of not just a water park, but of an actual relationship between a mother and her son. The neighborhood party happened on the last Saturday of summer. Marcus's parents invited everyone, neighbors, the Hendersons, Tommy's family, kids from school. The water park became something public, something that represented more than just engineering. It represented a boy who'd been told no and found a way to say yes anyway. It represented a mother learning to let go of control in exchange for genuine connection. It represented what was possible when people stopped managing their fear and started actually living. As Marcus watched kids of all ages running through the slides, getting sprayed by the water cannon, using the rope to propel themselves across the pool with wild abandon, he realized something profound. The water park wasn't just about splashing. It wasn't about the rebellion, though that had been necessary. The water park was about learning that chaos and joy weren't opposites. That engineering could mean more than just mechanics. It could mean engineering your own life, your own relationships, your own future. His mother stood at the edge of the pool, watching the kids play. She was still worried about the water damage, still concerned about the chlorine, still occasionally slipping into the habit of management. But she was present in a way she'd never been before. Actually there, actually looking, actually seeing her son and understanding what he'd built. "Thank you," she said to Marcus as he passed her. "For what?" "For being brave enough to make me look at myself. For building something I had to either destroy or learn to accept. For forcing me to choose." Marcus hugged his mother, something he hadn't done unself-consciously in years. She was still learning. She still had the edges of her mother's need for control. But she was learning to be something different, something better. As the sun set over the backyard, turning the water park into something that looked almost magical in the golden light, Marcus understood that this was what growth actually looked like. It wasn't clean. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't something you got to do without consequences or conversations or the difficult work of actually changing. But it was real, and it was his. And his mother, for the first time all summer, was actually here to see it. The water park would eventually be dismantled. That's what summer parks do. They're temporary installations in the architecture of childhood, meant to exist for a season and then be stored away, remembered more in spirit than in fact. But what it had created, the way it had forced his family to actually communicate, to actually choose each other, to actually be honest about their needs and fears and desires, that would remain. As the light faded and the kids finally tired and the party wound down, Marcus sat by the pool one more time. His mother sat beside him, finally quiet enough to just be present without needing to manage the moment into something safer. "You know what's wild?" Karen said finally. "I told your father this afternoon that I'm thinking about going back to school, studying something I actually care about instead of just having the degree I got to impress my parents." "Really?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, it turns out I'm not actually made of the material I thought I was. I'm made of something different, something more complicated. Something that wants things and feels things and occasionally builds water parks with her son." Marcus smiled. His mother becoming herself instead of becoming her mother's idea of what she should be. It was transformative in its way, more creative than any engineering project. By September, the water park had been disassembled, stored away, transformed back into component parts awaiting some future season. The backyard returned to normal, controlled, managed, the way Karen had originally designed it. But something had shifted in the space it occupied. You could feel it in the way the yard seemed somehow more alive even in its emptiness. The memory of chaos lived there now, in the walls and the concrete and the water itself. Marcus's mother had started her therapist appointments. She'd called a family counselor. She'd scheduled a long conversation with her father about the expectations that had been passed down for generations. She was working, actively, intentionally, at becoming a person who could let her son build whatever he wanted without immediately dismantling it for the sake of control. It wasn't perfect. Progress never is. There were still moments when Karen slipped into her old patterns, still moments when her need for management and control reasserted itself with surprising strength. But now Marcus had something to point to. Not just a memory, but an actual evidence that change was possible, that people could choose differently, that engineering, whether of water systems or of family dynamics or of your own life, required both precision and trust. "Do you regret it?" his father asked him one afternoon in September as they stood looking at the now empty backyard. "Knowing that it's gone." "No," Marcus said. "It did what it was supposed to do." What was it supposed to do? Marcus thought about the transformation of his mother, the honesty of his father, the way the water park had forced all of them to actually show up and be present and choose each other with intention instead of habit. "It proved something," Marcus said finally. "It proved that we could actually be different than what we've been, that we could choose connection over control, that engineering your own life is actually possible if you're willing to take the risk." His father smiled and put his hand on his shoulder. And in that moment, in the empty backyard where a water park had been, where chaos and joy had lived for one perfect summer, Marcus understood that the real engineering project had never been about water or cannons or slides at all. It had been about building something that could survive dismantling, something that could change a family by forcing them to choose, something that proved that even after you take it apart, the effect remains, in the way your mother looks at you, in the way your father stands beside you, in the way you've all learned to actually see each other. The water park was gone, but it had left something behind that was infinitely more valuable. The knowledge that transformation is possible, that rebellion can be creative instead of destructive, and that sometimes saying no to someone you love requires you to eventually say yes to yourself.